What ho chaps, I'm Magical Mike, host of the Amnoon Evening News and amateur video bloke. A lot of stories and details came from the making of this machinima, and I thought it would be somewhat interesting to have a look into what went on behind the scenes. So if you're the same, then welcome along. A quick warning though, this video does come with the risk of completely shattering the magic of the original machinima. If you're still with me though, let's dive in. I can't really remember where the idea came from in the first place, but it was early on, just after Path of Fire released. I think at that point I'd already explored all the maps pretty thoroughly, after about maybe a week of playing, and had seen so much detail in all of them that I wanted to find a fun way to present a bunch of it, which is kind of a glowing part of Path of Fire really as an expansion. So an in-game news style program wasn't much of a leap beyond what I used to do with patch and story overview videos during Season 1 and 2, so I settled on that idea fairly quickly. Originally I'd planned to do a video for each map, perhaps from different fake networks that held their own biases. The Vabian one, for example, would have been all in favour of Joko, but I had no idea how long it was going to take to make just the first one, so while it isn't off the table completely, as ArenaNet like to say, it's not really something I'm going to be looking into anytime soon, if at all, sadly. So for the Crystal Oasis, I'd planned on talking about a lot more things that go on in the map. Events, bounties, different enemy types, like a Steve Irwin kind of thing, specific area news. But when I started writing the script, I suddenly realised how long it was getting and had to cut a lot of those ideas out. Scripting is always the very first thing that I end up doing. Well, I say that about 99% of my videos. There's some that happen and then I want to talk over them, but the script here came first. I don't think there's anything particularly interesting to say about how I write, really, but I guess notably this one went through a lot of edits and rewrites, and not all of them were my own changes. I originally tossed out the idea to a few people in my guild and my Discord server, asking if they wanted to voice various characters along the way. Normally when you do this sort of thing, most people will be interested in getting involved, but I've had experiences in the past with not many people following through. This, however, was a massive success, so much so that I actually ended up with too many people and not enough stuff for them to play. The enthusiasm for my silly ideas was genuinely amazing. I can't thank everyone enough, but man is it hard to cast everyone before you even have roles available. One of the personally fun parts for me has been hearing what everyone has to say about the final video. The way I gave the parts and the scripts out was probably not conventional. I only gave people their own parts and bits of context that they needed. Of course, this is fine, it's not a big deal to anyone, only those of us involved were surprised at the end of it all, but it was a lot of fun to hear everybody's reactions to each other's parts. Honestly, some really cool moments hearing all the excitement and enthusiasm being shared at the end of it. So let's talk individuals a little bit. Xavier's Cavalier Raptor part was the first thing that I actually fully finished, audio and video wise. We were on a shorter deadline due to his job, so we had to get things done fairly quickly. The original dialogue was almost exactly as it is right now, but with one major difference. I needed to match up the shot of him riding the Raptor mount as the Amnoon Cavaliers do, so we went and shot that no problem, but when reviewing what I had, seeing the Raptor shake animation was just too good of an opportunity to miss. I had to ask him to incorporate that, and that he did.
And further beyond this, alright, give me a second. And further beyond, back up please. There we go.
A very convincing and fun little detail, so thanks Xavier. I wasn't sure if Wooden Potatoes would agree to this sort of thing. When I asked him, I pitched the idea quite vaguely because I wasn't fully confident in it yet. Obviously everyone knows that he makes very long videos, so the cheeky joke on my part of cutting him off could have easily put him off. I made it clear that that's what I was going to do, and happily he was all for it. He was all for helping out, so thanks for being cool about it, man.
So I'm just going to read what you've sent me, and I know that you'll do something cool with it. You say just be you, you'll cut me off awkwardly at some point in this editing to fake people out. Okay, so I'll just literally read the script, alright? I've not even proofread it. Here we go.
I even found somewhere to put some of the emotes that we experimented with too. Kez's part was difficult at first. I had no idea how I was originally going to write a hype piece for the Casino Coin Blitz and was stuck on that for quite a while. Luckily, the Power Thirst idea came to him in some weird flash of inspiration, and after a draft, a rewrite or two and a couple of edits, Kez came up with something that absolutely blew me away when I first heard it.
Hey, do you want to feel so rewarded? Try Coin Blitz, events where people who need gratuitous amounts of coins.
If you've never seen the old Power Thirst videos on YouTube, then go take a look. I've actually parodied them before in an old Guild Wars 1 video with some audio effects, which I was fully intending to use here, but decided I didn't need to as soon as I heard the original take. Fork's parts were varied. I've played some D&D with him, and I knew he'd be up for playing some of the more crazy characters that I'd came up with.
It's real hot and dusty!
He didn't disappoint. The Hidden Identity Order of Shadows guy was subtle, the Weather guy was suitably sudden, and the crazy shirtless guy was... well, you know how that was. The script was fairly loose on that character by the end, even resulting in a slightly damaged voice for one night, which made me feel terrible when I asked for another take. Sorry about that. The interview was supposed to be all in one go as well, not split up by other people's, but I felt like it worked nicely split up in the final cut. Valek wasn't the only person to give me multiple versions of their character's audio. However, I will say that they all stood out in one way or another. I was sure that the political editor should be very serious to begin with, but after hearing the nasally version, I had to go with that.
Councillor Amnoon has long been known as an avid supporter of the Modern Crescent, but due to some pushback within the community, has faced much difficulty in convincing voters to his side.
This stuff was at the height of the Praise Joko memes as well, so I gave him permission to run with that idea and stick a bias into the news, but he decided not to, which in the end turned out to be a good insight. Someone in the comments did pick up on the very subtle Joko censorship though, which was nice to see, so well spotted to you.
And there will be no need to request the aid of that infested,
Thank you, Cavalier Merrick.
A quick note about Sean's timing here, which still manages to get me to laugh every single time. Everyone took this way more seriously than I expected, and Sean was one of the first people to surprise me with that aspect.
Those people wanted to join the undead ranks of the Crescent anyway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did. Right?
Strangely, it was harder than I thought to find somebody who could do a convincing Southern American accent. The people I asked just couldn't seem to manage it, but then out of nowhere, the good old Canadian boot spur conjures one up.
We've been working on this ranch for 15 years. We've been working on this ranch for 15 years. We've been working on this ranch for 15 years. We've been working on this ranch for 15 years.
And there's something oddly satisfying about this combination that I can't quite put my finger on. And of course, everyone else that added voiceovers. Teapot was an obvious choice from the start to me, thanks to his convincing ability to sound like a very serious BBC reporter.
Time will tell to what extent this war will have on our citizens, but for now, things seem tentatively in balance.
One and done, easy audio, easy take, easy, as I'm sure he'd probably say. Av providing more evidence to the old adage of never work with animals.
I was just passing by. Sorry, what was the question again? Now my dog's at the door, so we'll try that again.
And Laserhog for recording the exact same piece of audio like 12 times because I wasn't quite happy with it. Sorry about that.
I mean, if more people keep flooding in from the south, how long before Amnoon's in danger?
There's a distinct style to the sound of certain news anchors and reporters on TV that you'll just hear. I don't quite know how to describe it, but the tone kind of goes up over a sentence and then back down in order to kind of add a certain emphasis in the right areas. And this was pretty hard to do actually, because it's easy to put that emphasis just about anywhere you want, which can sound all sorts of wrong if guessed at. Done badly, I just sound like a budget Jeremy Clarkson, and that's not what I was going for in the end. Fun though, not exactly what I dare to call voice acting, but it's a start I suppose. Putting all of this sound together and balancing it properly was a whole challenge in itself. While not overly difficult, it was definitely tedious and it took a very long time. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it, because it is immensely satisfying to see or hear it all come together. It's also why you see so many audio tracks in the project file here, most of which are 90% empty. Each of these is either a person, some background audio, or some music. And normally I'd just balance these things in way fewer audio tracks, but it just kind of made more sense to organise them into these layers. It just ended up being much easier. I'm usually fairly awful at audio in general. I'm never happy with my sound balance on my regular videos, between my voice and more background music that I add, so this was a kind of a huge personal success to have it all sounding normalised. Maybe I could have normalised it more easily with Audacity, which is what I'm recording this with right now, but in the end I opted to go manual instead. Was also a small exercise in very, very tiny edits and noise removal from many different audio sources of varying quality, which is, I don't even know how to begin going about having to describe that, because it's just a lot of complex, little, silly, tiny things that, it just takes time. The last piece of the puzzle was background sound, to which Guild Wars 2 answered quite easily. There's a lot of variety in what you can hear in-game when you turn all of your sliders to 0, except your environment volume. The way the wind changes with acoustics and obstacles, buildings, muffle or dynamically change crowd noises, water, fire, creaking wood, animals and bird noises, I was actually pleasantly surprised about it all. NPC dialogue though, well now that's a strange thing when it's isolated. It's sort of eerie sounding in a way. It often has a kind of reverb effect, which was quite awkward to work with.
The Morden Crescent may no longer be the honorable Sunspears they once were, but they would make powerful allies.
That's the audio out of the way, and that's the heart of the project firmly solidified. That was really where it all came together. So now to talk about making it look authentic as well. Guild Wars 2 doesn't include any sort of tools or special way to aid with the camera direction, so we're very limited in what we can and can't pull off. With things like Reshade or Guild Wars 2 Hook, you can achieve some extra levels of control that wouldn't normally be possible in the base game, such as green screening characters and environments and things like that. But I was determined not to use any of these external plugins, and I'm happy to say that I didn't have to in the end. Everything filmed in-game is all vanilla. Sure, it might have been easier to film my character in a green screen environment and then edit him behind a desk, but I think I managed to keep a level of authenticity and kind of weird practical effect kind of feel by opting not to do that in the end. So by wrestling with the basic options we have in-game, I did sort of add a little extra challenge for myself, but it turned out to be a satisfying way to work, as is usually the case with this sort of thing. Intro sequences to various news programs I've watched are usually very basic. It's hard to describe exactly what I mean here, but they don't go crazy, they don't challenge you in any way, they're just kind of there and they ease you into the program. I needed something relatively simple that ideally didn't have a fixed camera, that I would have to manipulate myself. Luckily, since Pathify had just launched, I'd played the sequence to get to the desert region a couple of times already, and the airship cutscene came to mind and ended up working quite nicely. It sort of reminded me of the old BBC News intro with the hot air balloon, for anyone that can remember that far back. Jeez. Other options included just a bunch of vistas cut together, but I wasn't exactly happy with that idea, even if one of them did make it into the final cut. The music in that cutscene also just happened to be a perfect fit too. The AEN logo is nothing special, really. Honestly, since I was already opting for the BBC vibe to the video, I went all the way with taking their font on Red Square's logo thingy, and just adapting it to the POF logo's colours. There's no real story here, I just thought I'd mention it. Though it turns out that picking a suitable font is hard. I usually just want to stick to regular stuff, but not here. I know, guys, I know. Wow, font. How interesting. I'm aware. Location scouting was a big deal. With all the things I'd written in, I knew that there would be appropriate places to have on screen while talking about them, but needed to pick those places out specifically. Did you know that the day-night cycle was so long, by the way? There was more than one occasion that we had to wait for 30 or 40 minutes to get a shot that made sense in continuity. For example, we had to wait outside Amnoon's front gate with Xavier to get the Cavalier shot, with the constant Choya attacks smashing up the gate and bringing players to the area and causing aggro problems for us and messing up the shot and the angles and all sorts of things. Nightmare. There were many times like that I needed to get shots without other players interrupting and looking strange in the background. The market stalls on that same road get smashed to bits by the Choya event, and it's an obvious main route for people to run down, so getting the right angle with Laserhog in particular was interrupted a number of times.
Okay, tell me when.
Whenever.
Cares, don't you dare.
Not with that in the background though, holy shit.
That's beautiful.
The casino coin blitz could have presented a massive challenge in that respect, but by some sort of luck we avoided any problems at all. In fact, by having so many people at the time willing to help it all along, I was able to set my friends up in such a way that made it look better and slightly more believable without causing intrusions to the shot from other people that had no idea what was going on. During Kez's whole sequence, all the people running back and forth on different mounts is all choreographed. Well, it's sort of choreographed, it's more controlled chaos at least. The disgruntled ranch owner, played by Boots, had much less of a controlled environment. We used the ranch to the southeast of the Amnoon southern outskirts, with all the Dolyaks fenced in behind the building. Initially we were going to set up outside the fence, but the shot had so much of the fence in it that I didn't like it and I ended up moving us into the pen itself. And yes, that meant that the Dolyaks ruined a number of attempts at that shot. It turns out that a massive wild animal phasing through your camera isn't exactly very realistic, nor is the random fear effects that they suffer when the event triggers. So that took some time to get right. Most of any sort of trouble came from mobs and players really, although it wasn't their fault per se, they had no idea. Mobs attacking and downing me as the cameraman were few, but it did happen a few times. The sand sharks, as we were trying to film Fork's weatherman line, were an absolute menace. Since I couldn't move or I'd lose the angle, and Fork had no weapons equipped because we didn't want weapons in the shot. Trying to film the forged camps was perilous as well. More sources of pain and just random things aggroing me and downing me, and it's when I have the sound off I have no idea what's actually going on. It also turns out that various sandy effects in the wind and the weather are completely random, or at least I haven't quite found a pattern in them yet, as far as I can tell, so I had a great location in mind to begin with to have Fork do his bit, but that place never had that sand effect again, so we had to find somewhere else. The other major location that features actually isn't just one place. The refugee camp is actually spread out quite widely around the entire map, but it has a bunch of little scenes in each area that when kind of focused in on, makes it look like it's all one huge place. It turns out that there's a lot going on in the heart area, inside the city itself, along a few of the main walls, the housing that displaced the nobles, and along many of the roads where I found priests of Cormyr tending people. There's tons of detail to appreciate, and it's quite a shame that mounts got introduced in the expansion, which allows us to speed past it all. But then again, maybe you can go back and get some more enjoyment out of it by experiencing it at a slower pace. I don't know. Again though, with that being in a heart area, not having too many people running around and doing their own thing to break the illusion was quite important to avoid. The final area was quite a lucky find. It wasn't somewhere I would have gone out of my way to look at if I wasn't intentionally searching for it, and that was Zalenber's desk in the casino. Originally I'd assumed that the NPC would have been put there, or that there would have been patrolling NPCs to interrupt things, but no, it's just a perfectly fine, empty area to set the newsroom in, so that worked out great. Consistency is one of the biggest concerns when it comes to all sorts of aspects of this video. The sounds, the overlays, the spoken content, the delivery, and the framing of every single shot has to be consistent. Otherwise, the entire thing becomes just too disjointed. It breaks apart and it pulls you totally out of the immersion. I've already talked a lot about this, but to add to that, simply framing the characters as they spoke was one of the absolutely critical things I wanted to get perfect. Getting the interviewees to stand in the right places on screen and face in a particular sweet spot, framing them to get as much detail as possible and keeping it all similar required a lot of coordination, and Guild Wars 2's camera controls aren't bad, but they're not built to get such specific requirements out of them. Character height was a bit of an issue, and I had to contend with that too, from other people and from my own characters. My ranger, Bear Grylls, turned out to be the most normal height I could get out of all of my characters, while also having a lower angle when not setting the camera to character height. A lot of experimenting with embiggening and miniature tonics went on, but I think that the only time they even got used was to hide a green story star that I couldn't get rid of in one shot, since for some reason even hiding the UI kept it visible. Those eagle-eyed viewers can check out a carefully placed giant Norn LA Kez when Valak is talking, and even then it's still not quite perfect. A couple of tiny things to note were to do with the mouse cursor. I use shadow play to record things, and it also includes the cursor, which I obviously didn't want to show up, so I had to make sure to keep it off screen, which I messed up a few times. I had to be careful not to accidentally highlight anything either, like some giant interactable tents in the refugee camps that stay lit up if the cursor left the screen while mousing over them. It's such a strange little obnoxious thing, but something you just wouldn't think of unless you were really paying that much attention. Clicking on things too would make my character turn to look at them, so that had to be avoided as well. And again, these might seem all like dumb little things, and they are, but everything just adds up. Consistency. Everyone apart from Av managed to get their characters in the video. They're all the right people at the right times. It just so happened that Fork had a Norn Ranger with similar hair to Av's main character, so we got a substitute by sheer luck. The one guy that didn't actually make it into the video though is Mighty Teapot, and this is probably the strangest story of the whole behind the scenes. The character you actually do see on screen is played by Shoshana. It's a level 2 human elementalist in the desert, wearing the exemplar outfit dyed to match Teapot's original main Ellie ? I think it's an Ellie. We even got the sliders and body type as close as possible. It's essentially a super accurate clone for the sole purpose of getting one shot of him. We managed to share all the sliders and character creation details to get this done, and to make him look super legit. But why did we have to do that? Now, I don't understand how World v World works, but from what I gather, transferring to a different server gives you some kind of penalty to rewards or something, which is a strange and unrelated issue, aha, but no, because I didn't anticipate Teapot to only have EU accounts, whereas I play on NA, so he couldn't guest over to show up. So while he was willing to transfer for the few minutes that I needed him, I just felt that it would be massively unfair to ask that. So, knowing a few people that do buy outfits and have a wide selection of dyes, I hit up the guild, and Kez and Sho came to the rescue with the pieces needed to make our clone. So it was a bizarre series of events there, but the icing on the cake was the name of that character, and don't worry, it is just a joke, and Teapot found it funny too. A lot of what made this come together nicely were the emotes that we have. I could easily have just been quite lazy and simply used /talk, and had that be the only thing that the characters do on screen. However, there's so much more to the emotes that just needed a chance to show up. /yes and /thanks and many others fit in quite nicely in terms of looking like regular gestures during regular speech. Some people had favourite emotes, like how Wooden Potato starts off with a salute, and I managed to fit in the /upset emote in there as well. /threaten and /surprised got plenty of use by Sean, Fork and Kez, and I think Laserhog got even a /ponder in there too. My point being that we wanted to animate the characters in much more interesting ways than simply shooting a looping talk animation. This did present a new challenge though. How do we match those animations to the right timing of the speech? Boots was the only exception here, as he actually did try to match his emotes up while listening to himself talk, and that worked out nicely, and it was very easy for me to edit, so I appreciate the work gone into that. But for everyone else, I gave them a list of things to do, with a few cues as we went. They were pretty much guesswork in the end, and with a few different shots and in different orders, we ended up with at least one thing that ended up working out. Then a second problem arose that became evident with my own part and the Casino Blitz in particular. How do we make these things look smoother? We could have tried to match things up, but it was about impossible for me to work that out on the fly, so we just recorded a long series of random emoting and animations to be cut together later. Cutting them so abruptly, with no idles in between though, looked way too obvious. It just seemed quite jarring, so I needed to work around that. In the end, L and J cuts were handy with the report sections, but over long sections featuring one character, invisible cuts had to be abused an awful lot. Hopefully it's difficult to tell in the final cut just how many times these happen, since they're supposed to be subtle, but any time the camera zooms in or out slightly, that's me obfuscating the blending of two emotes together. Knowing that now, I wonder if that's gonna ruin the video for you. Is some of the magic lost by explaining that? I think so. For me, the video looked pretty good when it was all cut together, but adding the newsreel overlays and animating them made an absolutely massive difference. It's such a simple thing when you look at the finished video, but the layers of complexity that these basic things add is quite significant.
Events! Rewards! Events! Rewards! Swimming coins, floating coins, roof coins! More casino coins than your bags have room for! Events! Rewards! Events! Rewards! Swimming coins, floating coins, roof coins! More casino coins than your bags have room for!
The overlays themselves are just simple blocks of colour on a transparent background. A friend of mine, Ella, had recently just mentioned how she does some of the things in her vlogs, and it got me looking into masking in my editing program, which is Sony Vegas. This is just a way of hiding or making certain elements of a layer transparent, but by adding keyframes, I can animate that effect as well. So when all the blocks of colour slide into view from the respective angles and in the right directions, with the specific timings I chose, it's a really satisfying and deliberate effect. It's also deliberately lifted from how the BBC have their overlays scrolling in as well, which was really fun to replicate. The text on all of these is similarly keyframed and timed properly too, scrolling in from the left to reveal the name of each reporter. There's honestly so much keyframing and masking in this project that I can't remember it all, but a lot of manual fine detail went into making sure it all worked out right. Speaking of fine detail, there's an entire layer here dedicated to the clock that appears next to the AEN logo, and it's even totally accurate to the video timer. There's that attention to detail again. The scrolling news headlines were animated, masked, and written carefully as well. Everything there is supposed to be appropriate, lore-friendly, and sensible, adding to that level of authenticity that I was going for. NPC names are all accurate, location names, references to events and mastery points. There's maybe a few details in there you might have missed, so I'll probably put them on screen, though they do scroll past a few times, so you might have called them all. There's also mention of Fork's weatherman being a chef previously, which is just a silly kind of in-joke about what I said when he first showed up on that character. He does look like a chef though, doesn't he? I'm not the only person that thinks that. I think the final major thing to note was that NPC dialogue was really hard to actually get. Having those characters interspersed with us really grounded the overall feel some more of the project. Filming those NPCs though was absolute potluck. I had one chance to get the dialogue recorded and to try and frame them correctly as they spoke. Otherwise I had to replay entire sections of story and I just wasn't willing to go through all that. And I didn't manage to do it right in the council chambers. They simply spoke too quickly to let me reframe for each councillor. And this was awkward. I still wanted to use those shots and those voiceovers. I needed to, in fact, because it was part of the script and I needed that to make the political section make sense. So I had to solve this problem. So the vox pops, I don't know if that's the right term for it, where the screenshot of the NPC at a shared angle accompanies the unmasking text, ended up being my solution. It wasn't all planned, but the more I think about it, the happier I am with that section and that I included it. Just for that familiar feeling I managed to get of how a real news program might deliver some quoted statements. The one fake live section where I interrupt wooden potatoes also stands out in a similar way to how the framing is kind of set up, but there's nothing particularly of note there, just that it continues the same style some more. Because consistency. And I think that is about it. So oh boy, that was an interesting behind the scenes video, aren't we all glad that we watched this? Sorry I didn't realise just how much I had to say about the project, but it really was fun to put together and it turned out to be lots of work too. I learned a lot about editing, a lot about machinima, and gained a whole lot more respect for it too. I'd like to say thanks for everything. It was super cool to get 34th in the contest, and it was a welcome surprise as well. I'd also like to invite everybody to see if our voice actors are in the comments, if you've got any questions for them, or if you just want to say hi or well done, or whatever the case may be. I know I, for one, would like to extend a massive thanks to everyone that appeared in this and for showing such massive enthusiasm, as I've said many times in the past. Of course, I can't say it enough. Maybe some of these details were boring to listen to, maybe some of them were helpful. I don't know. But either way, Thank you very much for all watching.